My name is Camilla, and the night my world cracked open was drenched in chandeliers, silver, and laughter that was never meant for me. I can still see it. The velvet hush of the restaurant, the faint perfume of roses woven with the sharper scent of truffles and wine, the way waiters moved like dancers across the polished floor. Every detail was designed to impress, to signal wealth and exclusivity. For Adrian, my husband, it was the perfect stage. For me, it became the scene of my public unmasking. I had taken hours to prepare. A black satin gown, my mother's pearls around my throat, and a fragrance Adrian once told me made me unforgettable. I smoothed my hair until every strand obeyed. I told myself this night mattered, that after years of sacrifice and long nights, of standing by him through failures and debts, I would finally be seen not just as his wife but as his partner. We had risen together, I thought. Tonight he would acknowledge that. We were seated at a long table for 8. 6 of his colleagues surrounded us, men in tailored suits with watches that gleamed under crystal lights, their wives polished and poised. Conversation flowed like the endless champagne. Adrian commanded the space, his voice smooth, his stories polished. He had rehearsed this performance in front of me for years, and now he delivered it perfectly. He was magnetic. They laughed at every line, leaned in at every pause. I sat quietly, smiling when expected, lifting my glass at the right moments, but inside I felt the distance. He shone like a star at the center of their universe, and I was a shadow orbiting far away. No one asked me about my work, my thoughts, or even my life. I was decoration, and Adrian did nothing to change that. And then dessert arrived. Alongside the sweet came the cruelty. The woman to my left, glittering in diamonds, teased Adrian about his wild college years. Stories I had never heard spilled into the air like champagne foam. They laughed, old friends sharing a secret circle. I tried to smile, but my chest tightened. I wanted to believe Adrian would shift the spotlight, include me, remind them that I had been part of his story for years. Instead, he turned toward me. His eyes sparkled, but not with kindness. He raised his glass as though considering me, and said with casual sharpness, "Camilla tries, but you all know how it is. She never really fit into this world. She means well, but sometimes, well, she can be a bit of a disgrace." The word disgrace struck like a whip. My chest went hollow. The laughter that followed was not loud but sharp, deliberate, each chuckle like a blade. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against porcelain, but no one cared. The sound was swallowed by the room's amusement. Adrian leaned back in his chair, smiling, proud of the cruelty he had unleashed. Heat climbed my throat, but I forced myself to stay still. To move, to protest would have been to prove him right in their eyes. My silence was survival, but it was also the birth of something else. And then came the final humiliation. The leather folder was placed on the table. Adrian pushed it toward me without hesitation. His voice casual, dismissive. "Camilla has this one." She insisted. I had not. My lips parted, but no words came. Adrian rose from the table, gesturing for his colleagues to follow. They left laughing, voices echoing like ghosts. The waiter set the folder before me. I opened it with trembling hands. The number inside was obscene. Thousands, not hundreds, charged for courses I barely touched, for wine I hadn't ordered, for laughter that had cut me open. My card felt heavy as I slid it inside. The waiter's eyes flickered with something, pity perhaps, but he said nothing. When I stepped into the night, the city lights blurred into streaks. My heels clicked on the pavement, each sound sharp as glass. The cab ride home was silent, but inside me roared a storm. My chest burned with shame, but beneath the fire of humiliation, something colder began to take shape. This was not a slip. It was not thoughtless. Adrian had chosen to make me small, chosen to parade me as less than human, chosen to leave me with the weight of his arrogance. I sat in that cab and made a promise. He thought I was powerless. He thought humiliation would silence me. He thought wrong. My name is Camilla, and this is the story of how I made a man choke on the very luxury he used to destroy me. Because humiliation has a price. And Adrian never saw the bill coming. That night, I thought the bill was only money. I had no idea it would cost him everything else. The morning after the dinner, the silence in our house felt heavier than marble. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but it only revealed the cracks I had been ignoring for years. Every corner of that home whispered of sacrifice, my sacrifice. Yet Adrian moved through it as if he alone had built it. He stood before the mirror, humming lightly as he adjusted his cufflinks. His movements were precise, practiced. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my nightgown, staring at him, waiting for an acknowledgement. A glance. A word. Anything. Finally I asked softly, "Why did you do that to me last night?" He didn't turn. Do what? Call me a disgrace. Leave me with the bill. Walk out as if I was invisible. He met my eyes in the mirror then, his face composed. "Camilla, you take things too personally. It was a joke." They laughed. "You should learn to laugh at yourself." A joke. That single word hollowed me out. He had reduced my humiliation, my pain, to entertainment. I rose from the bed, heat coursing through me. "That wasn't a joke, Adrian. That was cruelty." He smiled faintly, coldly. "They're important people. I cannot let your sensitivities embarrass me. If you make me look small in front of them, then yes, you are a disgrace." The word struck again, harder this time because he meant it. He hadn't stumbled into cruelty. He had chosen it. He picked up his watch, snapped it onto his wrist, and kissed my forehead without warmth. "Be useful today. The cleaners are coming at noon. Handle them." Then he left. The door clicked shut, and I sat in silence, shaking. The scene from the night before replayed over and over. His laughter. Their eyes. The bill. My card trembling in my hand. My chest ached with shame, but shame slowly hardened into something else. Rage. I walked into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My eyes were swollen, my lips pale. But beneath the ruin I saw a spark. I whispered to my reflection, "You will not be his victim." That day passed in a haze. The cleaners came and went. I moved through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. I replayed his words, his tone, the smirk he wore when he said, "disgrace." And then I remembered something else, the phone call I overheard that morning. He had told someone, "Tonight works. Make it somewhere discreet." Discreet. That word lodged in me like a thorn. When Adrian returned late that night, his tie loosened, I watched carefully. He set his phone on the counter as he shrugged off his jacket. My pulse raced. I moved casually, pretending to tidy crumbs, and picked it up. His passcode was still his birthday, arrogance or carelessness I couldn't tell. What I saw hollowed me. Dozens of messages. Some professional. Some intimate. A name stood out. Helena. Her text sparkled with familiarity. "Dinner at 7. Same place as last time." His reply. "Looking forward to it. You always know how to make me forget the world." Forget the world. That was me. He wanted to forget me. I replaced the phone quickly, plastering a smile when he turned. My face betrayed nothing, but inside my blood turned to ice. Over the next week I became a shadow. I smiled at his stories, I laughed at his lies, but I listened. I tracked his absences. I examined receipts left in his pockets, faint lipstick stains on collars, and invoices tucked into his briefcase. Every fragment was a thread, and I collected them all. Each night, I lay beside him in silence as he slept peacefully. But I was awake, scrolling through the pieces of proof stored in a hidden folder on my laptop. Every document, every screenshot, every receipt. They were no longer scraps of his betrayal. They were weapons. He thought humiliation would silence me. He thought I would crumble under the weight of his arrogance. But he didn't know me anymore. One evening, as I followed him from a distance, I saw her, Helena, standing outside a restaurant, her dress clinging like a secret, waiting for him. When Adrian approached, her face lit up. He kissed her cheek with tenderness I hadn't felt in years. My stomach twisted, but I didn't cry. I took a photo instead. That click of the camera sealed it. Grief had ended. Strategy had begun. But as I dug deeper, I discovered something worse than Helena. Something that could not only destroy our marriage, but unravel Adrian's entire empire. The more I searched, the more I realized Helena was only the surface of something far deeper. Infidelity was betrayal enough, but buried inside Adrian's phone and papers were signs of another life. One built not just on lies but on shadows. One evening while Adrian showered, I slipped into his study. His desk was locked, but I had watched him enough times to know the trick of the drawer. Inside were files and contracts, neat and precise. I began flipping through them, my hands trembling. At first they seemed routine: partnerships, shipments, investments. But the language caught my eye. Words like deliveries, arrangements, and favors repeated too often, too vaguely. When I cross-checked a date with a receipt I had already saved, the pieces aligned. Adrian was not just building his company. He was cutting deals under the table. My heart pounded as I photographed each page. These weren't scraps of infidelity. They were evidence of corruption. Documents that could topple his empire if revealed. I returned the files carefully before he left the shower. That night, lying beside him as he slept, I scrolled through the images on my phone. My chest burned with betrayal, but my mind was cold, sharp. Adrian thought of me as weak. What he didn't know was that every careless detail he left behind was another weapon I now held. Over the following days, I lived a double life. By daylight, I played the dutiful wife. I cooked dinners. I smiled when he asked about his schedule. I pretended not to notice when he left for meetings that lasted long into the night. By shadow, I documented everything. I tracked his movements. I followed him at a distance more than once, careful to keep my car 2 vehicles behind. I watched him enter hotels, restaurants, offices. Helena was often with him, radiant, oblivious, clinging to his arm like a prize. Each time my chest tightened, but I didn't confront. I only clicked my camera, capturing proof. I scoured receipts from his pockets, some stained with wine, others marked with hotel logos. I scanned them into a hidden folder on my laptop, labeled under a false name. I screenshotted his messages, cross-referenced his calendar, and built a timeline so precise it could have been a case study. With each new discovery, the outline of his secret world sharpened. Adrian wasn't just cheating. He was laundering his image, curating a facade of success while stitching deals in the dark. Money moved in strange patterns. Names I didn't recognize appeared, always paired with vague phrases. And always the same contact surfaced: Victor. Victor's messages were unlike Helena's. No flirtation, no tenderness. Only numbers and urgency. Confirmed delivery. Funds secured. Keep it off record. The tone was clinical, almost military. Whoever Victor was, he wasn't a lover. He was something else, an accomplice. The realization made my blood run cold. Adrian wasn't just a cruel husband. He was reckless, maybe even criminal. And if he was willing to risk his empire in shady deals, then humiliating me had been only the beginning. One night, I followed him farther than usual. He drove to a warehouse district on the edge of the city, far from his usual glittering haunts. I parked at a distance, my heart pounding in my throat. Through the windshield, I saw him meet Victor, a tall man in a gray coat, his features sharp in the dim light. They spoke briefly, their gestures tense. Adrian handed him a folder. Victor slipped him a flash drive. The exchange was quick, practiced. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself not to act, not to storm forward, not to scream. Instead, I lifted my phone and took photo after photo. Adrian disappeared into the warehouse. When he emerged half an hour later, he looked lighter, almost relieved. He had no idea I had seen everything. Driving home, my hands shook. I realized then that I wasn't just gathering evidence for a divorce. I was holding dynamite. If I lit the fuse at the right moment, Adrian's empire would collapse before his very eyes. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed strategy. I needed someone who could help me turn all these fragments into a blade sharp enough to cut through his armor. That night, I called my sister Marianne. For years, she had warned me about Adrian. I had dismissed her as bitter, cynical. But now her words echoed in my ears like prophecy. When she answered, her voice was cautious. "Camilla? It's been a while." I swallowed my pride. "I need you. Please." We met the next day in a cafe far from Adrian's world. As soon as I slid the folder of evidence across the table, Marianne's eyes hardened. She looked at me, not with pity, but with the quiet ferocity of someone ready to fight. And she gave me a name. A lawyer known for dismantling men like Adrian. That was the moment I realized I would not be fighting alone. The discovery of Helena had shaken me, but the deeper truth was darker. Helena was only the visible crack in the surface. The real rot was hidden in Adrian's contracts. The words I kept finding, deliveries, arrangements, favors, were too vague to be legal, too careful to be innocent. When I matched one of those dates to a receipt I had pulled from his briefcase, it was no longer suspicion. It was fact. Adrian was not just a cheating husband. He was a man cutting secret deals behind polished doors. The weight of it pressed down on me. I had evidence, but I was still one woman with a folder. Paper is powerful, but only when placed in the right hands. Alone I could not wield it. So I called Marianne, my sister. It had been months since our last real conversation. She had warned me long ago. He will never love you more than he loves himself. At the time I dismissed her as bitter. That night her words rang like prophecy. When she answered, her tone was cautious. Camilla? I need you, I whispered. We met the next morning in a small cafe on the far side of the city, far from Adrian's circles. The tables were scarred, the mugs chipped, but for the first time in weeks I felt safe. Marianne arrived in her work clothes, hair pinned back, eyes sharp. She studied me as though weighing whether I was ready for truth. You look like someone carrying a storm, she said. I slid the folder across the table. Screenshots, photos, receipts, contracts. My hands shook as she flipped through them. Her expression shifted from anger to grim satisfaction. I told you, she said, her voice quiet but edged. You never wanted to hear it. Now you see him for who he is. Tears threatened, but I forced them back. I don't want pity. I want strategy. Marianne leaned closer. You cannot do this alone. You need someone who knows how to cut men like him to pieces, and make it legal. Her eyes held mine. Then she gave me a name. Evelyn Ross. She doesn't lose, Marianne said. Especially not against men who think they're untouchable. The next day, I found myself in Evelyn's office. It was not grand. No marble floors or golden logos, just a clean space with shelves lined in case files. But the woman behind the desk radiated authority. She listened without interrupting as I laid out my story, my folder, my fears. When I finished, she tapped the stack once, neat and precise. You've built a strong foundation, she said. But this is not enough on its own. Men like your husband survive whispers. They thrive on rumors because rumors can be denied. If you want to topple him, you need timing. And spectacle. He humiliated you in public. If you want him to feel it, you must do the same. The word spectacle burned into me. Adrian had used the spotlight as a weapon. I would return it sharper. Evelyn laid out options. Civil suits, injunctions, leaks to the press. But none of that would cut deep enough. I shook my head. I don't want to leave quietly. I want him to stand in a room full of people and feel it crash around him. Her eyes gleamed. Then we let him build the room. And we make sure the walls fall while he stands inside. That was when Adrian handed me the perfect opportunity himself. He announced a gala to celebrate his latest merger. Invitations went to the same wealthy circle that had laughed at me weeks earlier. He was planning his own coronation. He had no idea it would become his execution. The plan began to take shape. Evelyn would prepare a sealed injunction connected to one of Adrian's shady partnerships. At the right moment it would be unsealed, forcing banks to freeze accounts. Marianne reached out to an old friend in journalism, a columnist who specialized in pulling masks from polished faces. He agreed to sit on the evidence until our signal. And me? I would supply the spectacle. We hired an editor to assemble a short tribute video. Polished, elegant. It began with Adrian's smiling face, his speeches, his triumphs. But halfway through the images shifted. Receipts, texts, photographs. Dates and names too sharp to ignore. The applause would curdle into silence. Piece by piece we built his trap. Adrian moved through our house unaware, laughing into phone calls, adjusting ties, texting Helena at night. He didn't see me slipping out to meet with Marianne. Didn't notice me practicing my calm in the mirror, rehearsing the stillness I would wear when the lights burned brightest. For the first time in weeks I felt something close to power. I had allies. I had a plan. I had the spark of revenge burning steady in my chest. And then the first crack appeared. One morning as I opened the front door, an envelope slid across the floor. Plain. White. Inside a typed note. Do not proceed. Some mistakes cannot be undone. I froze. Someone knew. Or someone wanted me to fear that they did. Marianne dismissed it as intimidation. Evelyn filed it away with calm hands, her voice cool. We keep moving. Fear is what they want. But the unease lingered. That night, as I reviewed the guest list for Adrian's gala, I saw a name I hadn't expected. A name that made my stomach twist. Claudia, Adrian's mother. A woman who had never accepted me, and who carried enough influence to turn an entire room in his favor. Claudia's name on the guest list made my stomach clench. Adrian's mother had always seen me as an intruder in her son's kingdom. She measured me not by love but by pedigree, and in her eyes I had never been enough. If she stood by him on that night, the room might follow her. Still, we could not alter the plan. The gala would be our stage. We had to sharpen every weapon until it cut clean. Evelyn gathered us in her office, spreading documents across the table like a general laying out a battlefield. Marian sat beside me, arms folded, jaw tight. Claudia changes nothing, she said. She will defend him, yes, but she cannot erase evidence. Evelyn nodded. She can sway sentiment. But sentiment dies in the face of proof. Our task is to make the proof undeniable. Step by step, we refined the counterplan. First, the injunction. Evelyn filed it quietly, naming Adrian and a cluster of shell companies. Sealed now, it would remain invisible until the moment we chose. Once unsealed, banks would be forced to freeze his accounts. Adrian thrived on access to money. Cutting that cord would make him stumble. Second, the press. Marianne's contact, the journalist, prepared his column. He promised to release it online the evening of the gala. Time to hit just as Adrian expected applause. The column would not scream accusations. It would list dates, names, and transfers, the dry precision that makes scandal impossible to ignore. Third, witnesses. Marianne tracked down 2 former partners Adrian had pushed out. Both agreed to give brief statements if needed. Not dramatic but factual. Facts, Evelyn said, are more dangerous than outrage. They cannot be spun away. And fourth, the spectacle. The video tribute, carefully crafted, would begin with Adrian's victories. Photos of him shaking hands, sound bites of his speeches, clinking glasses. Then the tone would shift. Receipts filling the screen, texts appearing in sequence, photographs layered over contracts. It would start like applause and end like a guillotine. We rehearsed everything. Evelyn drilled me with questions, preparing me for accusations. Marianne played devil's advocate, pointing out every weakness. What if Adrian claims the documents are fake? What if Claudia interrupts? What if the feed is cut? Evelyn had answers for each. Notarized copies, chain of custody, backup stored on multiple drives. Nights were long, days blurred. But as the gala drew closer, I felt myself transform. I no longer moved like a woman wounded. I moved like a woman waiting for her cue. Adrian, oblivious, grew more arrogant by the day. He spoke of the merger as if it were destiny. He boasted of the gala, of the powerful names who would attend, of the photographers who would capture his triumph. At night, he kissed me perfunctorily and texted Helena once he thought I slept. I lay beside him, heart steady, whispering to myself, "You are building your stage and I will watch it burn." 3 nights before the gala, another envelope arrived. This one was heavier, with no return address. Inside was a single page, typed formal. "We are aware of your actions. Stop now or consequences will follow." No signature. No hint of who had sent it. Evelyn studied it calmly. This is intimidation, nothing more. But I could see a flicker of tension in her eyes. Marian wanted to shred it on the spot. I slipped it into my folder of evidence instead. Fear was still fuel. The final rehearsal was quiet. Evelyn outlined the sequence one last time. The injunction unseals at 7:30. The article goes live at 7:35. The video begins before dessert. You sit in the front calm. Do not react. Let the room do the work. I nodded, my breath steady. Marian squeezed my hand. Remember what he did to you. This isn't vengeance alone. This is justice. The night before the gala, I walked through our house slowly, touching the furniture, the walls, the photographs. The place felt like a museum of lies. I paused at the dining table where Adrian had once laughed at my cooking, at the bedroom mirror where he had adjusted his tie while dismissing my pain, at the door where the envelopes had slid like warnings. This house had witnessed my humiliation. Tomorrow it would witness his. And yet, as I tried to sleep, I could not shake the vision of Claudia. her voice commanding silence. Her hand on Adrian's shoulder. What if proof was not enough? What if her presence turned the room back into his court? The night of the gala arrived with cruel perfection. The city glittered as if it belonged to Adrian. Towers glowing like his kingdom, streets alive with music and headlights. He had planned every detail and I had memorized every step. My gown was black silk, simple but deliberate. I wanted no sparkle, no jewels, nothing to distract from what was coming. I wanted to sit in silence, invisible, until the moment silence turned against him. The ballroom was dressed in gold and crystal. Chandeliers burned overhead, every table crowned with roses. Waiters in white gloves carried silver trays that gleamed like weapons under the lights. Guests poured in, the same men and women who had once laughed at me over dessert. Their gowns shimmered, their laughter carried. Adrian welcomed each with practiced charm, his smile as polished as the marble floor beneath our feet. And then she arrived. Claudia, his mother. She stepped out of a black car like royalty, her gown sweeping across the steps, diamonds flashing. The crowd straightened as if gravity itself shifted. Adrian bent to kiss her cheek, and her hand lingered on his arm like a seal of approval. When her eyes found me across the room, they narrowed, sharp as a blade. Marian leaned in close. Do not let her rattle you. I nodded, but my pulse quickened. Evelyn stood at the far end of the room, phone in hand, calm as stone. Everything was ready. The injunction set to unseal at 7:30, the article cued to go live minutes later, the video tribute locked in place. We had rehearsed every beat. All I had to do was wait. But Adrian, as always, thrived on control. He delayed his speech, weaving from group to group, basking in the applause of his circle. He looked untouchable, radiant in his tuxedo, Claudia shadowing him like a queen at her son's coronation. At 7:30, Evelyn gave the faintest nod. The first gear turned. Somewhere downtown, a court clerk unsealed the injunction. At 7:35, phones buzzed under tables. The journalist's article had gone live. The words fraudulent contracts and offshore accounts began flashing across screens. Murmurs spread like cracks through glass. Adrian noticed. He frowned, leaning to hear a whispered update from one of his partners. But he straightened quickly, raising his glass for attention, forcing a smile. He thrived on performance. He would not give in to unease. That was when the lights dimmed. The tribute began. At first it was flawless. Photographs of Adrian shaking hands, clips of his speeches, the swell of music. Guests clapped politely. Adrian's smile returned, proud and secure. He looked at Claudia, who nodded, her approval radiating. Then the shift. A hotel receipt appeared on the screen, his name printed clear. Another image followed. An invoice from a luxury restaurant, time-stamped with the very nights he claimed to be working late. Then text messages. Helena's words, his replies, tender and incriminating. The laughter faded. Gasps replaced it. The montage built, relentless. Receipts, contracts, photographs from the warehouse. Piece by piece, the image of Adrian as golden success fractured into the portrait of a liar. Adrian's chair scraped as he stood. Turn it off, he barked, his voice cracking. The technician only shook his head helplessly. The file was locked. The images kept coming, each one sharper than the last. Claudia rose. Her voice carried clear and commanding. Enough, she cried. This is manipulation. My son is under attack. Do not let yourselves be deceived by cheap tricks. The room wavered. Guests glanced at one another, uncertain. Claudia's presence was power. Her words bent the air. Some faces softened, nodding. Others stiffened with doubt. Adrian straightened, emboldened by her defense. He raised his voice. This is slander. These are lies crafted to ruin me. Someone here wants to destroy everything I've built. And they are using my wife to do it. Every head turned toward me. For a heartbeat, the spotlight was mine. My pulse thundered, but I kept my face calm. I said nothing. Silence can be sharper than words. The screen faded to black, ending on a phrase I had chosen carefully. Truth has a cost. The ballroom was heavy with silence. Claudia placed her hand on Adrian's arm, her gaze sweeping the room. Who among you will stand with my son? She demanded. A few hands lifted. Loyalty. Habit. Fear. I felt my chest constrict. She was swaying them back. Our careful plan trembled. And then Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced down. I saw the color drain from his face. His lips parted, eyes wide. Claudia leaned close, whispering, but he did not answer. The message on his screen shook him more than the video, more than the injunction, more than Claudia's defense. And in that moment I realized it wasn't from us. Someone else had entered the war. The room was frozen, every eye on Adrian as his phone buzzed again in his trembling hand. I could see it from where I sat, the glow of the screen illuminating his face, draining him of the last remnants of control. His mouth tightened, his jaw locked. Claudia leaned in, whispering urgently, but he did not respond. Whatever message he had read shook him more than the montage, more than the injunction, more than the whisper spreading like fire through the ballroom. For the first time in years I saw fear in him. He tried to recover. He straightened, forced a smile and raised his glass. "Do not be deceived," he said loudly. "This," he gestured toward the screen, "is a smear. It is manipulation crafted to humiliate me. And you all know who would benefit from my fall." His eyes cut toward me. "My wife." Gasps rippled through the room. All eyes shifted. For years, I had been the silent ornament at his side. Tonight I was his chosen scapegoat. My heart hammered, but I rose slowly, letting the silence build. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. I looked at him, not the crowd. "You called me a disgrace in front of these very people," I said, my voice calm but carrying. "You left me to pay for your arrogance. You thought humiliation would silence me. You thought wrong." A murmur spread. Adrian's face flushed. "She is unstable," he snapped. "Vindictive. This so-called evidence." Evelyn stepped forward, her heels clicking against marble. She carried a folder sealed and stamped. "These documents are certified copies filed with the court this afternoon," she announced, her tone like iron. "Every receipt, every transfer, every contract authenticated. Nothing shown tonight can be dismissed as fabrication." She held the papers high. "If Mr. Reed wishes to dispute them, the court will hear him tomorrow. Tonight, the evidence speaks for itself." The silence that followed was devastating. Phones buzzed again. News alerts spreading Evelyn's words beyond the ballroom. The journalist's article had updated with the phrase "independently verified by legal counsel." Guests glanced at their screens, their doubts collapsing into certainty. Adrian's mask cracked. He slammed his glass onto the table. "This is treachery." His voice broke into a roar. "You think you can destroy me in a single night? Do you know who I am?" But his words no longer held weight. His allies shifted in their chairs, avoiding his gaze. Some rose quietly, slipping out. Others whispered behind hands. The tide had turned. Claudia, desperate, clutched his arm. "Adrian, stop. We can manage this privately." "No," he bellowed, shaking her off. "I will not be ruined by lies." His hand slammed the table again, rattling silverware, desperate for control. And then the officer entered. Uniformed, calm, carrying a folder under his arm, he strode into the center of the room. His voice was even professional. "Mr. Adrian Reed, you are required for immediate questioning regarding the injunction unsealed this evening. We ask for your cooperation." The room erupted. Cameras pivoted. Guests gasped, some delighted, some horrified. Adrian's face went white, then red. Claudia clutched at him, shouting, "This is outrageous." But the officer stood firm. Adrian's world collapsed in real time. His accounts frozen. His partners fleeing. His mother powerless. His empire unraveling not in boardrooms, but under chandeliers, before the very people whose admiration had once sustained him. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, my breathing calm. This was the moment I had promised myself that night in the cab, when humiliation burned like poison in my chest. Now the poison was his. The officer gestured toward the door. Adrian hesitated, his eyes darting wildly across the crowd, searching for an ally. None came. He looked at me, his face contorted, and for a heartbeat I saw not the man who had once charmed me, but the man who had crushed me for sport. He mouthed 3 words. Words no one else saw. "This isn't over." As they let him out, I realized he wasn't just threatening me. He was warning me. Adrian still had cards left to play, and someone else in the shadows was ready to help him. The moment Adrian was escorted out, the ballroom erupted. Conversations that had been whispers broke into shouts. Chairs scraped. Phones lit up like fireworks. Half the guests rushed for the exits, eager to distance themselves from scandal. The other half stayed transfixed, their eyes hungry for every detail. I sat perfectly still, my glass untouched, my heartbeat steady. For once silence was mine, not his. A woman near me whispered too loudly to be private. "Did you see the texts? With her name right there, Helena?" Another voice cut in. The contracts, the offshore wires, it was all there. People were not debating his guilt. They were confirming it. Claudia, however, was not finished. She stood near the stage, her hand gripping the microphone as if it were a weapon. "This is slander," she declared, her voice trembling with fury. "My son is the victim of envy. These so-called documents are lies, planted to ruin him." Her words wavered, but her presence carried weight. A few guests murmured agreement. Others stared at their phones, reading Evelyn's prepared statement already spreading online. Certified documents filed with the court. Independent verification complete. The balance shifted again. Facts were overtaking loyalty. Evelyn stepped forward, calm, precise. "Ladies and gentlemen, everything you saw tonight has already been submitted to the courts. If anyone doubts authenticity, the law will confirm it. What you choose to believe is up to you." Her voice was steady, but the room still buzzed with division. I could feel it in the air, half convinced, half clinging to denial. Claudia's influence was powerful, but even she could not erase contracts stamped with Adrian's name. Marianne appeared at my side. "They're recording this," she whispered. I glanced around. Half a dozen phones were aimed at me, at Evelyn, at Claudia's outrage. By morning this would be everywhere. The thought should have terrified me. Instead it steadied me. I wanted the world to see. Then came the headlines in real time. Screens flashed as notifications poured in. Merger gala turns to scandal. Adrian Reed escorted out by authorities. Clips of the montage began circulating online before dessert even arrived. Some guests gasped as they watched themselves appear in background shots of leaked footage. The scandal was no longer contained in the ballroom. It was global. Adrian's allies tried to rally. One of his partners shouted, "None of this has been proven." Another demanded to know who had prepared the montage. Eyes turned again toward me. For a second, I felt the weight of suspicion, the question in their gazes. Was I the architect of his downfall? I rose slowly. My voice was calm, though inside my chest thundered. No wife should endure what he did to me. No partner should be humiliated for sport. Tonight you saw the truth. If you want to call that revenge, so be it. I call it justice. A few clapped. Just a handful, but it was enough. Others looked away, uncomfortable. But the silence that followed was not mine to bear. It was Adrian's. Claudia's face hardened into marble. She spat the words like venom. "You will regret this, Camilla. You think you won, but you have destroyed yourself too." I met her eyes without flinching. No. He destroyed himself. I only held up the mirror. The words hung in the air, and for the first time I saw doubt flicker even in her. The officer's voice echoed from the hall, confirming Adrian had been taken for questioning. Guests began to file out, their faces pale, their voices urgent into phones. Some offered me nods, others stares of disapproval. I was no longer invisible. I was the center. But with the spotlight came danger. I knew Adrian would not surrender easily. And the message he had mouthed, "This isn't over," echoed in my mind like a warning bell. As I prepared to leave, Marianne touched my arm. "Be careful," she whispered. "The hardest part isn't making a man fall. It's surviving what comes after." Her words proved true before the night even ended. As I stepped outside, flashes exploded. Paparazzi had gathered, cameras firing, microphones thrust in my face. "Mrs. Reed, did you leak the evidence? Are you divorcing him? Was this premeditated?" I said nothing. I slid into the waiting car. But inside my phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "You may think you finished Adrian, but some debts aren't paid with humiliation. Watch your back." My blood ran cold. The gala was over. Adrian's empire was collapsing. But a new shadow had entered the game, and I realized my fight might have only just begun. The morning after the gala, I woke to silence. But it wasn't the comfortable silence of peace. It was the charged hush that comes when the world is watching you. My phone lit up before I even swung my feet out of bed. Dozens of notifications, missed calls, unread messages, headlines. Adrian's name screamed across every news outlet. His photo, his face caught in that moment of collapse, stared back at me from every screen. Golden boy brought down in ballroom scandal. Adrian Reed questioned after merger gala disrupted by evidence. From mogul to mayhem, the fall of Reed. I sat on the edge of the bed, the light from the phone painting my face, and for the first time in months I smiled. But triumph came tangled with unease, because my name was there too. Some articles called me the silent wife who spoke out. Others whispered about manipulation, asking if I had engineered the downfall. The world was not united. Some admired me. Others painted me as vindictive. Marianne arrived mid-morning, carrying a newspaper still warm from the press. She dropped it onto the kitchen counter. My image stared back from the front page. Me standing in the ballroom, calm as marble while chaos swirled around me. The caption beneath: Camilla Reed, orchestrator or survivor? She poured coffee, her tone half triumphant, half worried. You're everywhere, Cam. He's finished, but you're not free yet. People will want to make you part of the scandal too. Before I could reply, the television chimed with breaking news. Adrian had been released after questioning, but regulators had announced a formal investigation into his company. His accounts remained frozen. The merger, suspended indefinitely. His partners silent or scrambling to distance themselves. Claudia appeared on one channel, her voice calm but brittle. My son is the victim of a calculated smear. This so-called evidence will crumble under scrutiny, and when it does, those responsible will regret it. Her eyes, even through the screen, seemed to burn straight at me. Helena, meanwhile, had disappeared. Paparazzi stalked her apartment, snapping photos of her slipping out with suitcases, sunglasses shielding her face. The headlines debated whether she was fleeing or merely ashamed. I felt no satisfaction in her disgrace. She was only a fragment of Adrian's betrayal, not its architect. By afternoon, the fallout deepened. Stock tickers flashed red. Every company tied to Adrian's name lost value. His empire, once untouchable, was unraveling thread by thread. Former allies spoke anonymously to reporters, describing his arrogance, his questionable decisions. His kingdom was collapsing not in silence, but with the roar of public abandonment. And yet, even as I watched it burn, I felt a hollowness inside. For weeks, revenge had been my fuel. It burned bright and hot, driving me through every sleepless night. Now, with Adrian stumbling under the weight of exposure, I felt the edges of emptiness creeping in. Marianne noticed. That night, she sat across from me at the dining table. You won, she said softly. I shook my head. No. Winning would mean I never let him make me small in the first place. This is survival. She reached for my hand. Then maybe that's the real victory. Surviving him. Her words comforted me, but unease lingered. Because Adrian was not a man who surrendered. He was a man who fought until nothing was left. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. A single message. The courts may take his money. The press may take his pride. But someone will make sure you pay too. I froze, staring at the glowing words. It wasn't Adrian's tone. It was colder, more detached. A shadow behind the shadow. I had thought the war ended in the ballroom. But now I understood it had only changed shape. Adrian had lost his empire, but I was still standing in the crosshairs. The weeks after the gala felt unreal, as if I were walking through the ashes of a fire I had started. Adrian's empire collapsed piece by piece. Banks froze his accounts. Regulators announced investigations. Investors pulled out one by one. Contracts unraveled, deals vanished. The man who once commanded rooms with a smile now found doors shut before he could knock. News anchors spoke of him daily. His name became shorthand for arrogance exposed. Photographs of him leaving offices with clenched jaw and hollow eyes replaced the glossy magazine covers where he used to grin beside champagne flutes. The empire he had built on charm and cruelty turned to dust in public view. Claudia, once the queen at his side, withdrew overseas. She gave one final interview, still insisting on his innocence, but even she sounded tired. Her voice, once commanding, cracked under the weight of proof. The world had moved on and she could not move it back. Helena disappeared entirely. Her name flared in the scandal's first wave, then was buried under the avalanche of Adrian's financial ruin. To me, she was always secondary, a symptom of his arrogance, not its cause. I felt no satisfaction at her shame. My war had never truly been with her. Adrian himself fought bitterly. He filed countersuits, shouting fraud, claiming I had fabricated evidence, painting me as vindictive. But each move he made collapsed under Evelyn's precision. Every claim met its answer. Every accusation was dismantled. His words grew louder as his power shrank. And me? I rebuilt. Quietly. I sold the house where marble floors had echoed with my humiliation. I bought a smaller place, one filled with sunlight and wood, not polish and glass. It was not grand, but it was mine. Every corner carried my choice, not his command. I returned to my work, not because I had to prove myself, but because I wanted to feel my own name on contracts again. The projects were modest, but they were mine alone. For the first time in years, I felt whole without his shadow towering over me. Yet even in victory I carried scars. Some whispered I was ruthless. Others praised me as brave. Strangers sent messages, some in support, some in scorn. I had learned to live with both. Because neither praise nor condemnation defined me anymore. I defined myself. At night I sometimes replayed the memory of that dinner. The laughter, the word disgrace, the leather folder pressed into my hands. Once that memory burned me alive. Now it was a reminder. What he thought would break me had only sharpened me. Adrian was wrong. I was never a disgrace. I was a mirror he refused to face, until the night I held it up to him under chandeliers. So here is my lesson, not just for me, but for anyone listening. Humiliation is not the end. Silence is not defeat. Every cruel word, every dismissal, every insult, they are not chains unless you let them be. They can also be receipts. And receipts, when gathered with patience, can become the bill no betrayer ever expects. My name is Camilla. I was the wife he called a disgrace. I was the woman he thought powerless. But I am also the woman who exposed him, piece by piece, until the world saw what I had always known. If you hear my story and see yourself in it, remember this. You are not small. You are not powerless. Even if someone strips you of dignity, you can rebuild it stronger than before. And when they least expect it, when they believe they have silenced you, you can make them pay the price of their own cruelty. Because humiliation has a cost. And trust me, when the bill arrives, they will never see it coming.